My son's missing fiance appeared on a reality show. She was sitting next to my husband. My son stopped eating the month after Jade disappeared. Not completely, but the kind of eating that is really just going through motions. A few bites, a pushed plate, the hollow look of a man whose body has remembered hunger, but whose mind hasn't agreed to care yet. I watched him for 6 months. I cooked the things he'd loved as a boy. I sat across from him at my kitchen table, and I talked about ordinary things because ordinary things were the only rope I knew how to throw. And every evening, I drove home and sat in my own kitchen and thought about Jade. Where she was, what had happened, why a 28-year-old woman with a job and a life and a man who loved her would simply cease to exist one Thursday morning without a word. I thought about those things for 8 months. And then I turned on the television. Before I tell you what I saw, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop your location in the comments. I'm always grateful to know where you are when you're listening to this. My name is Renata. I'm 58 years old. I have one son named Marcus. I have been married for 31 years to a man named Gerald. And this is the story of the evening everything I believed about my family turned out to be wrong. Let me tell you about Jade first. She came into our lives 3 years before she disappeared. Marcus brought her to Sunday dinner in October. He'd been seeing her for 4 months by then, longer than he'd ever kept something quiet, which told me before I even met her that she was different. She was. Jade was the kind of person who made a room feel more inhabited. Not loud, she wasn't loud, but present in a way that filled the corners. She laughed easily and listened carefully, which is a rare combination. She asked my mother, who was still alive then and came to that first dinner, about her childhood in a way that made my mother talk for 40 minutes about things she hadn't mentioned in years. After dinner, while Marcus was helping my mother to her car, Jade stood in my kitchen and dried dishes without being asked. I said, "You don't have to do that." She said, "I know, I want to." I thought, this one is real. They got engaged 14 months later. A small proposal, private, exactly right for who they were. Jade called me the morning after to tell me, before they'd told almost anyone else. Her own mother had passed 2 years prior. She said, "I wanted you to know early because you feel like family already." I cried in my car after we hung up. The wedding was set for the following September, a small venue outdoor, the kind of wedding that looked exactly like them. I helped Jade with the guest list on a Saturday afternoon at my kitchen table while Gerald watched football in the other room and Marcus was at work. We drank tea and talked about centerpieces and seating charts, and I thought, this is what I wanted for him. This exact afternoon, 3 months before the wedding, on a Thursday morning in February, Jade did not show up to work. Her colleagues assumed she was sick. By afternoon, they were concerned. By evening, Marcus was at her apartment, and her things were there. Coat, keys, phone charger. But she was not. He called the police. He called her friends. He called me at 11 at night. His voice stripped down to something I hadn't heard since he was a small boy and frightened. "Mom, I don't know where she is. The investigation found nothing conclusive. No signs of struggle, no financial activity after that Thursday morning, no sightings. Jade had simply stepped out of her life and left no visible seam." The detective assigned to the case was thorough, and as the months passed, increasingly unable to offer anything beyond the same careful non-answers. The case remained open. Marcus remained shattered. I remained at my kitchen table, cooking things he wouldn't finish, talking about ordinary things, holding the rope. Gerald was supportive in the way Gerald had always been supportive. Present, but not pressing. Steady. The man I had built my life beside for 31 years. He took Marcus fishing twice that summer. He sat with him during the hard evenings. He said more than once, "She'll turn up. People don't just vanish." I believed him because I needed to and because in 31 years, Gerald had not given me a reason not to. That changed on a Wednesday evening in October, 8 months after Jade disappeared. I want to describe this moment carefully because the details of it are still completely precise in my memory, the way certain moments are. Not because you try to remember them, but because your brain understands, in real time, that everything is about to divide into before and after. I was alone in the living room. Gerald was traveling for work. He was a regional sales director and traveled 2 or 3 times a month, had for years. Marcus had come for dinner and left early. I had turned on the television with no particular intention, the way you do when the house is too quiet and you need the sound of other voices. It was a home renovation reality show. the kind where couples buy a property and transform it. I had watched it occasionally before and found it pleasant and undemanding. The episode was following a couple who had purchased a Victorian house in a coastal town 3 states away. The camera moved through the house, the couple discussing plans, the host narrating over footage of rooms being gutted and rebuilt, and then the camera settled on the couple in the kitchen. The woman was facing slightly away, dark hair, the particular way she held her shoulders, the way she tilted her head when she was listening. I sat forward. The host asked the woman a question about the kitchen layout, and she turned toward the camera to answer. It was Jade. I know what you're thinking. I thought it too, for the first 3 seconds, that it was someone who looked like her. That grief does this, makes familiar shapes out of strangers, fills in beloved faces where they don't exist. But it was not a stranger. It was Jade. 8 months older, hair slightly longer, standing in a kitchen 3 states away, talking about cabinet finishes on a home renovation show. I turned up the volume with shaking hands. The host referred to her by name, not Jade, a different name, but the face, the voice, the way she laughed at something the man beside her said. I looked at the man beside her, Gerald. My husband of 31 years was standing in a kitchen 3 states away next to my son's missing fiancé on a home renovation television show. I sat in that living room for a long time after the episode ended. I did not call Marcus. I did not call Gerald. I sat very still, and I breathed, and I thought about what I had just seen, and what it meant, and what came next. I am a retired school teacher. I taught 8th grade English for 24 years. I have spent the better part of my professional life teaching 13-year-olds to read carefully, to examine what a text is actually saying rather than what they want it to say, to build an argument from evidence before they commit to a conclusion. I applied every one of those skills to the next 72 hours. I did not confront Gerald when he came home. He walked in on Friday evening with his rolling suitcase and his easy smile, and I made dinner, and we talked about ordinary things. I watched him the way I had not watched anyone since my classroom days, for what was beneath the surface, for what the text was actually saying. He was relaxed, natural, completely himself as far as I could tell, to the study. I want to pause here for a very long time. That night, I waited until he was asleep and I went to the study. I want to pause here for a second, because I know that some of you are already asking, why didn't you call Marcus immediately? Why didn't you call the police? Why didn't you confront Gerald the moment he walked through the door? Here is my answer. Marcus had spent 8 months barely eating, barely sleeping, rebuilding himself from the wreckage of losing the person he loved. If I was wrong, if the woman on that screen was not Jade, if I had made the terrible mistake that grief sometimes makes, I would not survive having done that to him. And if I was right, I needed to be completely, documentably, undeniably right before I said a single word. Tell me in the comments. What would you have done? Would you have waited? I recorded the episode on my phone, playing it back from the network's streaming app. I paused on every frame where her face was visible. I compared them to photographs of Jade on my phone, dozens of them, 3 years of Sunday dinners and holidays, and the engagement party I had thrown them in this same house. It was Jade. I was certain. The man beside her was Gerald. I was certain of that too, though the camera had not lingered on him and he had not spoken directly to the host. He was in 4 frames. In 2 of them, his face was fully visible. I wrote down the name of the show, the episode number, the production company listed in the credits. I wrote down the name Jade had been using. I wrote down the address of the Victorian house as best I could determine it from the neighborhood footage. Then I did what I had been trained for 24 years to do when a student presented me with a text I didn't fully understand. I went to the primary sources. The production company had a website. The show had a casting page with brief bios of featured couples. There was a listing for the episode I had watched. 2 names. Gerald's was not among them. But then, Gerald had not been the focus. The woman's name was listed with a short bio, a different name, a different city of origin, a different professional background, all of it false, all of it constructed. But the face in the small photograph on the casting page was the same face that had dried my dishes 8 months before she vanished. I found a private investigator the next morning. His name was Robert Finch, referred by a colleague whose daughter had used him during a custody matter. I called him from my car, parked 2 streets from my house, engine running. I described what I had seen and what I needed. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Send me the footage and the photos. Give me a week." He needed 4 days. The Victorian house was registered to a holding company. The holding company, when traced, connected to a set of financial accounts. One of those accounts had Gerald's name on it, not his primary account, a secondary one I had not known existed, opened 6 years ago. 6 years ago. Marcus had met Jade 3 years ago. I sat with that timeline for a long time. Robert also found the lease on an apartment in the coastal town. Signed 2 years ago, before Jade disappeared, before the house purchase, before any of this had become visible. Gerald's name. A second address he had been maintaining for 2 years while sleeping in our bed and taking Marcus fishing and saying people don't just vanish. Robert found one more thing. The home renovation show had been filming for 4 months before the episode aired, which meant Jade had been standing in that kitchen, filmed, documented, on record, while the police investigation into her disappearance was still active, while Marcus was still filing missing persons updates, while I was still cooking food he couldn't eat. She had not been taken. She had left, and my husband had been the reason. I called my daughter-in-law's sister. Jade had a younger sister named Priya who I had met twice, and who had been as devastated by the disappearance as any of us. I had her number still. I called her from the car. When I told her what I had found, she was silent for almost a full minute. Then she said, "I need to see it." We met the following day. I showed her everything, the footage, Robert's documentation, the photographs. She looked at each piece carefully, the way her sister had once listened carefully, and when she reached the last page, she closed the folder and put both hands flat on the table. She said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want Marcus to hear the truth from me before he hears it any other way, and I want Gerald to say it out loud in front of witnesses." She nodded. She said, "Then let's make sure he has to." What came next took 3 weeks to organize. Robert continued building the documentation. My attorney, a woman named Claire, who I had used for estate planning and who turned out to be, as she put it herself, very interested in this particular situation, began structuring the legal components, the financial accounts, the property, the implications of Gerald's actions for our 31-year marriage. I told Marcus on a Sunday evening, at my kitchen table, the same table where Jade and I had planned a wedding. I had debated endlessly about how to do it. For support. In the end, I sat across from my son, and I told him what I had seen and what I had found, and I put the folder on the table between us, and I let him go through it at his own pace, while I sat with my hands in my lap and my heart breaking for the second time in 8 months. He went through every page twice. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "How long have you known?" 3 weeks, I said. I needed to be certain. He looked at me, his father's eyes, which I had fallen in love with 33 years ago, looking at me from his father's son's face. He said, "Okay, what do we do now?" That was the moment I understood that I had raised exactly the right person. We confronted Gerald together, a Sunday afternoon 2 weeks later at the house. Claire was present. Robert was available by phone. Every document was printed and organized in a folder on the kitchen table. Gerald came in from the garage, saw us, saw Claire, saw the folder, and I watched him make the calculation that people make when they understand that the architecture has been found. He sat down. Marcus said, "We know about Jade. We know about the apartment. We know about the account. We know about the house." Gerald looked at me. I said, "I saw the show, Gerald." He was quiet for a very long time. Then he began to talk. The relationship with Jade had started before Marcus brought her to Sunday dinner, 8 months before. They had met through a professional event, Gerald's Industry, a conference, and what had begun as a single evening had continued in the way these things continue when no one ends them. When Jade met Marcus and fell in love with him, she had tried to end it with Gerald. Gerald had not allowed it to end cleanly. The relationship had continued in parallel. Jade with Marcus, Jade with Gerald. For the entire 3 years of their relationship, including the engagement, the decision to disappear had been Jade's. She had told Gerald she couldn't continue. She had been trapped between ending things with Marcus, which would destroy him, and continuing, which was destroying her. She had chosen a third option that I cannot defend and do not fully understand. She'd walked out of her life and into a new one that Gerald had helped her construct. The apartment, the new name, the television show which had been Jade's idea, a way to build a visible life under a different identity. Gerald had funded it. Gerald had enabled it. Gerald had visited that coastal town 11 times in the months I had watched him take Marcus fishing and sit with him on hard evenings. I looked at my husband of 31 years across my kitchen table, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not rage, not grief. Something colder and more permanent. Clarity. Claire said, "I think you've said enough for now." Gerald looked at me one more time, and I looked back, and I thought about 31 years, and I thought about the boy across the table from me who had spent 8 months barely eating, and I thought about a young woman drying dishes in my kitchen saying, "I want to." I said, "You should go." He went. Now the twist, the part I did not see coming, even after everything. 2 days after the confrontation, Robert called me. He said, "There's something you need to know about the show." The episode had not aired live. It had been recorded 4 months prior. And in the weeks between recording and airing, something had happened that the production company had not publicly disclosed. Jade had withdrawn from the show, mid-production. She had contacted the producers and removed her consent for her footage to be used. The episode had aired anyway, a decision the production company had made for contractual reasons, using footage they technically had release forms for, ignoring her withdrawal request. Jade had tried to disappear again. From the new life this time, Robert had found a forwarding address, a small town further up the coast. No Gerald, no show, no constructed identity, just a woman who had run from one thing and then run from what she'd run to. I thought about that for a long time. I have not contacted Jade. I have thought about it many times, and I have not done it. What she did to Marcus is something I cannot minimize and cannot excuse. But I also think about a young woman who lost her mother and found herself caught between two men and chose the only exit she could see, and then found that exit led somewhere she didn't want to stay either. That is her story to reckon with, not mine to resolve. Marcus knows where she is. Robert told him, separately, because Marcus asked and had the right to ask. He has not contacted her either. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. That's his road. Gerald and I are divorcing. Claire has been thorough, and the financial picture is complicated but resolvable. The house is mine. The 31 years were real, even when parts of them weren't. I am learning to hold both of those things at the same time, which is the hardest kind of arithmetic. Marcus came for dinner last Sunday. He finished his plate. That's the whole update. That's everything. My son finished his plate, and I cleared the dishes, and we sat in the kitchen for 2 hours talking about ordinary things, and ordinary things have never felt so extraordinary to me in my life. I'm Renata. I'm 58, and the show that changed everything is still streaming if you want to watch it. I don't. If this story touched something for you, if you are holding your own version of a folder on a kitchen table, waiting to be certain before you speak, leave me a comment. I read every single one. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story. See you in the next one.